Prof. Sandy was introduced. I mean, he has had an illustrious career. He has had front row seats in various boards of global companies. He was instrumental in setting up the Media Lab at MIT ahead of his time, and the value of that is showing up today in many ways. He's also involved with the Stanford Institute of Human-Centered AI, or Stanford HAI, and he's also a faculty on both sides, in Stanford on the East Coast and West Coast. He also works with many governments around the world as they're figuring out what it means for AI. So thank you very much, Prof.
My pleasure.
For being here and being a friend and a fan of Singapore all these years.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let me just start off. Your new book, Shared Wisdom, that you see over here. This is not a book launch. Argues that humanity's great leaps forward from the rise of civilizations to the scientific revolution were driven by cultural inventions that accelerated our collective wisdom. You make the case that solving today's challenges requires similarly fundamental inventions. But this time, we must design technology around human nature, rather than let technology shape society. What prompted you to take this historical lens, and what does it reveal about how we should approach AI differently this time around?
Well, a lot of the conversation around AI has been, it's going to kill us all, or we're all going to sit around eating lotus or something. I don't know what that even means. And I don't think either of those are particularly realistic. And so it's good to go back in the past. I mean, I've seen several revolutions of AI that had good parts, but also bad parts, and ultimately had bigger changes on society. I think we need to learn from that. But you can go into the deep past and look at how human intelligence works. So all too often in many of our disciplines, we think about humans as being sort of slightly broken logic machines. We're individual thinkers, right? But that's not true at all. I mean, Daniel Kahneman came up in conversations just recently. He estimates that 95% of our decisions are drawn from our cultural context. That's from what the people around us discuss, find works, our way of living. And that evolves over time. So when we were hunter-gatherers, you know, we would talk to each other around the fire at night and decide what to do the next day. And research shows that that's still true of the few hunter-gatherers who are around. That's how they plan the next day. And so I like to joke that, you know, people think that fire was a great invention, but it may have been the greatest part of that invention is it got people to talk to each other about what they did and what they were going to do. And then you look at, for instance, cities, the rise of cities. How did that happen? The original cities were terrible. People lived short lives, they died, the bones, you could see that these were not happy places. But just before the cities, people started having these big festivals where different tribes came together. And that was so valuable that they worked out ways to live together. And it's now well known that having different groups of people interacting is a prime source of innovation. It's why people move to cities. Even though cities are expensive and dirty and et cetera, the opportunities and the ideas are great. And then let me just ask you a question. So we all know about the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution, right? The Enlightenment. So what happened there? Well, science had been around for a long time. All these things had been around. What happened? Well, I'll tell you what happened. The Royal Mail was opened up to the commoner. So for the first time, no, seriously, right? So the men of letters were literally men of letters, right? They wrote letters like Leibniz wrote 3 10 to 15-page letters a day for his entire life to other people, all discussing theories of how the world works. And the kings of the time noticed that this was actually pretty useful and set up royal institutes and gave grants to people, so there was incentive to do more of this. And so it was bringing these different ideas together, and it's using an old technology like letters and paper that seems to have made that happen. And we've seen in recent years, the last 50 years or so, similar types of things. And so what we need is we need technology that lets us talk to each other better and figure out what to do better as communities, not as a whole of humanity, because different places are different. They have different backgrounds, different cultures, and that's good. Evolution doesn't stick on just one solution. It has a variety of them. Some of them don't work out. Some of them do, and they work out in different situations, and that's the way culture has been for humanity. So we need to think about how we move ahead. Like people say, people will be useless, with this new AI. Well, if it's going to be useless, let's think about it. So this is stuff that's trained on the past, and every financial thing you get says, past performance does not predict future results, right? So if you're trained on the past, you can have some interesting advice, but it's not necessarily the best. You need to try different things. That's called evolution, cultural evolution. And so we need things that can support that sort of diversity of ideas, of experimentation. And we know, just from a mathematical point of view, that sort of thing handles really diverse situations, long-tailed situations, non-stationary situations better than logic and reductionist thinking. So yeah, no, we have to be part of that, at least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, you said quite candidly, so people plus AI is better than AI.
Yep.
And it's better than people.
Yes.
Could you give us perhaps some illustrations? Today we're seeing, at least in the zeitgeist you see out there, company deploys agentic AI systems. Many jobs are lost because the agent can automate the job. Where do we go from here in terms of how companies and countries need to think about the evolution of jobs and skills? In the short term, it feels like a ROI conversation where I'm going to invest so much in AI. My ROI is I can do it with fewer people, and many companies are doing that. But how should we be thinking about this phenomenon as it plays out?
Well, I think that the story is common just simply because it's sort of shocking and worrisome. I have a son that works in Silicon Valley, and of course everybody's all worried about this.
Yeah.
But two things. One is what I just said about, past results don't. So if you have a situation where things change, that evolve, where you get rare events, and I have to tell you, this is almost everything, maybe not accounting, but almost everything else is this way, right? Hopefully not so much accounting. Then that sort of human curiosity about where to go is going to help. Eric Brynjolfsson, who's the founder of the Digital Economy Lab where I am, has something coming out soon where he interviewed all the sort of successful AI deployments. The majority of them did not reduce headcount. The majority of them augmented people. In fact, the ones that were by far the most effective were ones that handled all the scut work, right? And then promoted something that was questionable, new, different to the people. Those are the ones that were the most productive. And I think we still haven't gotten to the interesting part.
Yes.
The interesting part, how many of you like meetings? Yeah, right. Most of what a company is about is meetings and coordinating and getting everybody on the same page. And that's actually the biggest barrier to companies moving. And so with AI, you can do things like ask, what does everybody else in the company do? So it's sort of like internal communications. And we've built a little thing called Deliberation.io. It uses AI to help people talk to each other and come to conclusion. It's very simple. It does not contribute any facts at all. It just keeps the people focused on the topic, okay? It's like a normal sort of facilitator. And people like that twice as much as they do the human version of it. Can you imagine cutting the number of meetings in half or doubling the amount of effectiveness of the, it's like, that's worth going for.
Yeah.
And so the sorts of things you see that it's not all about headcount. A lot of companies are thinking of a long list of things they want to do, and now they can begin doing them because people are more productive. They don't need as much headcount on this problem, but there's this long-standing problem, and then we want to get into this new market, and those are the sorts of things that people talk about. I mean, I can give examples, and we'll probably get to them, that are really interesting, because one of the things that happens is you can do hugely more with much smaller teams. And just because they're small doesn't mean they can't have a multi-billion-dollar business. And it's sort of this much more sort of churning, boiling sort of thing, where teams of 6 to 20 people are building the future. Let me just give an example of something. So you say, what would that feel like? And it occurred to me, after talking to some friends up in San Francisco, that's not so far from what San Francisco is, say, versus a more traditional sort of city. There's 600,000 people who are adults, working age, in San Francisco. There are 15,000 venture-backed corporations.
Wow.
Think about that. So that means, like, if they're average 20 people, that's half the working population. There are 90,000 small businesses. So those are the people that didn't want to do AA, they wanted to cook and have a great restaurant, right?
Yeah.
Great. So, but it's all sort of small businesses with a few of the big guys put in there. And I think that's the sort of creative bubbling that AI could potentiate. And that's what we should aim for, right? Not the lotus eaters, not the doomers, lots and lots of creation.
AI frees up human capacity in companies and in jobs. In my own experience, because we work with many companies who are transforming with AI, and you're right, the ones who have been successful in transiting and moving from POCs to production have been the ones who have been working with the workforce, because they understand the domain and the context. And once capacity is freed up from meetings or coordination, that free up capacity actually helps them drive domain innovation that can be powered up with AI. But on the flip side, you also see companies who are, perhaps whitewashing this issue of laying off people, AI being a convenient label to do so in the short term. But if we take a step back, and you said we need to build a lot of problem-solving, innovating capacities to leverage that freed up time to do something quite innovative, such that people who are working in the workforce have value. How would you say education systems need to evolve? Because today, a lot of our education systems from K to 12 are designed around industrial age.
Absolutely.
Right?
You're going to be a gear in the machine. That's what the goal is.
So what advice would you have for countries and universities, for instance, who are training the workforce of tomorrow? What are the 3 things that they need to jolt the system?
Yeah, so, my history is I was one of the very beginning people in the Media Lab, and the Media Lab does not have a curriculum, right? It's like, what? No curriculum? No, we do projects, we build stuff. And you learn about the domain area, the tools, the concerns, by trying to build things and talking to people. It's a little bit like an incubator or something like that. You publish papers too, so that it gets certified as like good thinking stuff. I also was one of the first advisors for Minerva. Do people know what Minerva is? I wasn't much responsible for this, but basically it takes students from all over the world, spends a year teaching them how to dissect and think and put things together, and then they all move to Japan. So second year is in Japan, and then the third year is in India.
Nice.
And the fourth year is in France, and they move the countries around. So these are international citizens that graduate that have seen how all the different cultures do it, and they have learned to be able to stand back and ask, how do these systems work, and what's good about them? And I think that's an amazing thing. People who actually are reflective and understand innovation. I'll put one little thing in. So I was sort of honorary head of an assessment of innovation in China.
Wow.
And they wanted to know what were they doing with all their incubators. They have like 3,500 incubators.
Yeah.
And the answer was the government wasn't doing anything that mattered. What did matter was the community around the incubator.
Right.
If you had lots of people who had started companies and were willing to get engaged, that really mattered. Government did not like that too much.
Yeah. No, shifting gears a little bit, thinking about systems of the future empowered by AI, I think there's a lot of conversation globally around AI safety, guardrails, trust, building that into operating systems that leverage AI to ensure that this is being deployed in a meaningful way. in a safe way. And I think there's been stops and starts globally in terms of coming to consensus of what that looks like in general. Having said that, I think there are many countries and companies already starting to move in this space. Where do you stand in the spectrum of highly regulated, before the technology even evolves and is adopted, to a laissez-faire, let 1,000 flowers bloom? Or is there something in the middle that you think is a responsible way of moving forward?
Well, I had the opportunity to run a discussion group that included most of the presidents and prime ministers of Europe and the regulators on AI. And I was accused of being too Anglo-Saxon. And the reason I was putting forward a straw man that said, look, we don't really know where this is going, but we have to keep really close track of it, and we have to be able, so transparency, and then accountability. If somebody does something bad, they should be paid. They should get taken out. All the presidents and prime ministers liked that. The regulators hated it because there was nothing for them to do, right? And I think that the thing that people are converging on now is not this sort of a priori regulation, but a learning process. Yep. And Singapore has done just a fantastic job because you said, no, what we're going to do is put up a sandbox and we're going to test the claims that you make against the sandbox. And that's a certification for you to be able to sell the thing. And I think that that needs to actually be something that also happens continuously in one way or another. Okay. For instance, we worked with Microsoft to develop a certification, it's a ZK snark sort of a thing, that says, okay, this is actually the thing that got tested and passed the sandbox, right? And so you know you're getting what you paid for. But then you need to also have audit and liability in a very sort of clear way.
That's right.
And we could talk about what, there's this sort of hierarchy of how you do this. And what everybody thinks about is law. Law is hard, right? You've got all these sort of, communities that are going to try and come to something uniform. Uniform is usually wrong because atypical communities will suffer. It's only maybe the median sort of thing that will win. And then you have regulation, which is not really something that's done with enough consultation with everybody. And again, it tends to be too uniform. And then you have things like best practice.
Right.
Best practice is actually the way most of the world works, is, people have come to this sort of, here's a good way to do it, and now I can get insurance, right? Now I have protected myself from class action suits. So it's a sort of a liability risk control sort of a framework. And I think we're at a stage where that can happen. And I was mentioning to you earlier that, Singapore is in a great place for this because you're so central in trade routes. You could say, well, look, you've got to be certified, you've got to have these sorts of records. Otherwise, we won't give you insurance. Yep. We won't let you go through the port. And you can bet that all of the AIs that were doing trade would start sprucing up to do the right thing because they've got to make money, right? Yeah. So it's this sort of cooperative, okay, everyone's going to try and work together to hit some sort of standard that doesn't have obvious bugs anyhow. That's right. Thing that can move very quickly. And I think at the end we're going to talk about some of the things that I think some people in this audience really care about, things like privacy and individual control and stuff like that, because there's ways of making that really happen too.
That's right. Our one experience in Singapore was that I mentioned the 4 big priority areas for the Singapore AI strategy. And over there, we are creating sandboxes where we bring the best of breed technology supply companies and the big enterprises that define those sectors, be it transport, logistics, or supply chain. We're bringing the regulators in to actually co-create where technology, business model, and policy actually intersect. And we thought we would do this from a very domestic lens. But what we quickly realized is that these problems are global in nature. So we set up the AI Verify Foundation. And it is really an open platform where industry and academia and governments can come together in very well-defined sandboxes with a clear problem statement to actually test the technologies, bring them through the rigor, and actually co-create policies. And by policies, I deliberately use the word policy, because it's not about regulation. Because by the time you figure out regulation and you enact it, the technology has moved on you. So in a world where technology moves at 6 months clip, compared to a 20-year clip that we are used to, even our own mental models as a government has evolved dramatically. And then what we found was, in these domains that we have, actually we had a lot of global companies which had no businesses in Singapore come and play with us in the sandboxes, because that is the kind of environment they're looking for to actually co-create with like-minded companies around the world, from the East and the West.
That's right.
And their customers from the East and the West, because these are globally connected supply chains. And if you don't have the critical players on the table, you can't co-create. And even if you can, when you scale it, it is not going to be a solution that can scale, because supply chains are inherently interconnected and global. Likewise for finance, likewise for many other areas.
So one thing is that the way Silicon Valley thinks about AI is, I was having dinner with the head of Singtel and one of the leads for Temasek, and we're listening to VCs, the sort of Sam Altman type. I like Sam, but, and they were basically trying not to laugh, because frontier models are not where it's at. They're expensive, they're a little problematic. What really matters is AI that's good enough to do all the business processes, to run trade, to be secure, to do this. And we're pretty much there, but those systems need to be interoperable and they need to be certified that they work. And so if you look at what Belt and Road is doing for China, that's it. They're not trying to deploy frontier models. Yeah, there's DeepSeek and stuff like that, but that's not what they're trying to deploy. What they're trying to deploy is something that's good enough for all the sort of things you need to do to have trade. If you look at what Abu Dhabi, I'm an advisor to their investment fund, that's what they're interested in doing. They're building things that are pretty close to frontier, but they don't fill them in because they want everybody to have their own version of an AI, and they want them to be interoperable. India, I think, has very much the same type of thing.
That's right.
I work with the India stack, which is now the Citizen stack, which is a sort of a modular version of the original system that is being adopted by lots of other countries. And it's a free, open sort of policy, digital infrastructure on which you can build AI systems. That means that the AI systems have a better chance of being interoperable, and you can conduct trade, you can move around, you can do things, but that sort of digital public infrastructure layer makes things much easier. So it's great that you're doing that.
And as frontier technologies hit various workflows, hit various industries, hit various countries, going back to your very first question around the cultural revolution and designing systems around the human, and the word sovereign AI has been thrown around quite a bit. When it was first thrown around, it's about every country needs to have GPUs and infrastructure in order to survive, in order to win. But do you think the definition of sovereign AI is also evolving and emerging in terms of how countries think about positioning themselves, either from a resilience standpoint, in terms of a growth standpoint, to ensure that they're protecting their citizens and societies and economy while being continued to plug in?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was most obvious at Davos this year was all the countries reacting to the US and Trump and all that sort of stuff, and realizing that they were just way too dependent on what they call the hyperscalers, Google, et cetera, that they no longer had control of their infrastructure, that things like Swift, which is actually not an American company, but basically controlled by America, meant that they didn't have control of their money. There's all these things which they've given up sovereignty, and they want to restore things where somebody can't just take it away from them. And so, for instance, in Abu Dhabi, they built K2 Think, which is a pretty, state-of-the-art reasoning AI, but it's not filled in with all the content. What that means is you can go to your own country and you can fill it in with your content about all the common sense, the culture, the norms, things like that. And now you have a pretty good AI that speaks your language and your culture. And so what countries seem to really want is they want, first of all, something that preserves their culture, okay, which are not going to have the same values everywhere in the world at all. But they also want to be able to have this notion of being competitive on the world stage. So they want enough that they can have very efficient logistics chains and trade. They want their people to be trained. There's some things they want to have actually on-prem, right? Like if you got your tax records or your defense stuff, you want a box on your soil that has GPUs that does some of that. But that's getting cheaper and cheaper. I mean, you hear about these huge things and all that, but I have a friend that runs one of the largest government data centers, and they don't use NVIDIA because they're looking at the long term. They're saying, well, you know, look, more regular chips with sort of evolutions of the model are going to get us there. And that's going to do almost all the things that are critical internal functions. And then other things, I mean, people may have missed it, but China put together a network. It's a distributed data network, right? So tying together these very widely distributed data centers that they claim has about 98% of the efficiency of putting everything in one spot. And then the other thing that everybody gets all, excuse me for going on about this, but I have a friend who made his reputation testing supercomputers. Right? He has a Turing Prize, all that. He pointed out that if you can put your model in what's called floating point 4-bit format, okay, which NVIDIA and other people support.
That's right.
It's 15, 16,000 times faster than if you're doing it the way most people do it. Think about that. To get like 3 orders of magnitude, 4 orders of magnitude, pretty good.
Absolutely.
And then the things that are getting cheaper also at the same time are phone low power technology. So you get this movement of these sort of chips getting to be more efficient at this stuff, the models getting to be much more powerful, and you can see that you could have lots of little models. And so I think we're going to talk a little bit about personal AI. I would expect in 3 years, 5 years, something on that order, that every phone, every person in this room has an AI to help defend them, right? And it runs on your phone or your local laptop or something like that. Maybe it's backed up on the cloud. But powerful AI is going to be everywhere. People laugh at that. But I remember, you know, like the first time I was involved in setting up the Millennium Development Goals for the UN. And I said, we should make this really oriented at mobile phones. And everybody said, oh, most people have never made a phone call. True. But 5 years later, most people had a phone. And 10 years later, most people had a smart internet-connected phone.
That's right.
And if we had sort of shot at that, where the puck is going, as they say, could have done a lot better.
What 2 advice would you give if you were sitting at a board of, not the technology companies, but incumbent companies in different industries, trying to figure out how they should make a move into AI or transform themselves? What have you seen work well for companies?
Well, the most interesting things, there's 2 examples. One is I was on a panel with the CTOs of some of the biggest companies. And they were talking about how they couldn't get the data to do it, and the CEO was twisting their arm, and it was all horrible. And then somebody said, but of course, we set up AI buddies for everybody. And everybody else said, oh yeah, no, we've done that too. What is an AI buddy? How many people read manuals? Well, you could have a little AI that's read the manual, read the newspaper, read the, you know, sort of knows the flow of traffic, and acts as a context provider for the human. Right? It's like an active manual that can sort of say, well, you know, nobody else is doing that, or Joe down the hall is doing it, or last time we did that, it really was bad. And that level of coordination is something that is perhaps the major problem that corporations have. You know, getting everybody moving in the same direction with the same sort of assumptions, the shared wisdom, that's why the book is called Shared Wisdom, is the biggest barrier to agility in most companies. And so this is a very simple thing you can do. It's little local models. It's not the great big things. It's the data that you've already made public to the company, at least.
That's right.
So that's really pretty good. The second thing that I would probably say is that there needs to be much more horizon research by leadership about where are their blank spaces. And I'm going to promote a little paper that just came out. We took all the scientific journals in the world and the citations of them, and what we found is we could predict things that were hugely, going to be hugely impactful 20 years in advance. And it's very simple. It's basically there's sort of all these beliefs that people have and they reference each other, and occasionally you see a hole, right? It's like, these people are not talking to each other. If a paper ends up there, it'll be a superstar. And the same thing, incidentally, is true in patents. People are like inventing all these things, and patents are a little complicated, but again, there are holes. And when you see a hole, you say, that's interesting. And so, you know, that type of, it's not telling you the answer, right? It's telling you where things are happening and where things are not happening, and it gives you much more contextual knowledge about your environment than you would normally have. And I mean, I know a couple of incubators that do stuff like this, and they have success records in spitting out companies that are, you know, like in the high 90%. It's like, wow. Right? They're finding the they're analyzing the territory, using some of these tools, earlier versions of it, and they're just like rock stars. This is where Moderna came from, incidentally. Okay?
Moderna, yes. No, I think we were out of time, but I wanted to end on a last question. You know, we spoke a lot about model context protocol, agent context protocol. We also had a chat around human context protocol. But a broader question, if you look 5 years out, what gives you hope in terms of what we can start seeing in AI?
Well, the part that I really think is hopeful is you see this reduction of the footprint of AI onto local systems. So that helps a lot of the power, but it helps the control of data more than anything else. So we did a big thing in Washington, D.C. at Town Hall, and we asked them, what would you like to see AI in government be? And the answer was, and these were not the politicians, these were like the welfare recipients, they wanted their own AI to help them deal with the complexity of government. Don't you want something to help you deal with taxes, to deal with, you know, what data should I reveal, what things, I mean, the world's complicated. I could use some help. Maybe you could too. So I think that's actually really interesting. It moves to a world where people are not sharing, they're having their data sucked out the same way. They have much more sort of equal footing in the sense of they're able to draw on the smarts of all the people in their community to make decisions. And we also see versions of this where the AI, the personal AI, the thing you own, helps you talk to your community and find out what's happening in your community. Not, again, sharing data, but sharing insights among the community so that you could actually reinforce that central institution in human society, which is the community. And it desperately needs it. So.
Yeah. Well, on that note, a big round of applause for Prof. Sandy Pentland.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts today.
Bye, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you so much.